Are we live? Okay, great. Good afternoon. Welcome to this April meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee of the Indiana State Board of Education. Call this meeting to order. We have the meeting minutes from our last meeting, February 19th. I will entertain a motion. Have we had a chance to review them?
Yes.
And do we have BJ on, by the way? We do? Okay. So just for the record, BJ Watts, board member, is on the phone. Hello, BJ.
Hello, Gordon.
So do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the February 19th committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The minutes are approved. Our first agenda item is a staff update on Stakeholder Design Committee and partnership with IU and TAS.
Good afternoon. So we have a number of updates for you. You guys received a memo in your meeting materials on the Stakeholder Design Committee's work that you guys have tasked with following through with a number of projects, one of which is to create a vision for educator evaluation in the state. So the design committee worked over multiple meetings and virtually between meetings to collaborate on what that vision would actually look and sound like. So what you have in your memo is the vision, the final vision that the design committee approved to move forward to you all in their Monday meeting. And I'll come back to that in just a second. The design committee is also continuing to work on belief statements and theories of action for educator evaluation. We were hoping to be able to have both of those done for this meeting. They're still collaborating though, and just to allow the process to move forward in a very natural way, they're going to continue to have that conversation between their April meeting, which was on Monday, and their May 20th meeting, which they will do virtually. So they're continuing to move on those three big nuggets that you guys tasked them with. Additionally, the design committee worked through the educator evaluation survey that we talked about briefly in the last meeting, and the topics were sent to you all. And that survey will launch at the end of this week and will be open for about 5.5 to 6 weeks for educators to weigh in. We know it's a crazy time of year with testing and all of that, so we want to make sure that there's a nice big window. So that will go out at the end of the week. So those are the key highlights from the design committee.
Do you, just for everyone at home, would you mind just walking through those real quick for us?
I'm sorry.
The overview.
Yes. So there were 4 big components. First of all, there are 21 members of the design committee. We have teachers, principals, superintendents, other educational organizations represented in this group, and higher education as well. And for the educator evaluation recommendations that you all adopted from TNTP a few months ago, there were a number of projects that come out of those recommendations. And there are 4 primary projects that the Strategic Planning Committee, in order to allow the stakeholders really to weigh in, punted to this design committee. And the first one is creating the vision for educator evaluation. They're recommending to you what is in this memo, and we'll talk about how to move that forward in just a second. They also were working on the design of this survey and weighed in on whether or not we were covering all of the right topics to figure out what exactly is it from the field that they really appreciate about the current educator evaluation system, where do they see areas of improvement, and us really being able to get a clear picture on what's happening across the state, since evaluation looks different from one district to another. So it'll give us a good, clear picture at the state level. Also, this group will be working on a communications plan on how to roll out the vision, theory of action, and belief statements that the design committee has worked on, which will all come to you for approval. And also making sure that we have a good, streamlined communication system on educator evaluation in general. So we also have Sarah Pease from the Department of Education that sits on the design committee and is a collaborative member in this process to make sure we're all moving together. Additionally, this design committee will also look at proposing other improvements to the educator evaluation system. For example, they may be tackling in the next couple of months where we can streamline RISE. So for example, in the current RISE, the traditional RISE system that we have in the state, we've got some duplication in domain 1, which is planning, and domain 3, which is professionalism. So figuring out how we can really streamline to make sure that we're not putting evidence in 2 different places, and just taking the feedback we've heard from the field that we've had a couple of years with the evaluation tool. We've got a lot of positive feedback on that. We may need to look at paring it down or putting it on a diet, so to speak. And this design committee will be looking at that, which will also lead me into an update on IU and the partnership with them. So if you're okay, I'll actually segue into that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so the design committee, the stakeholder design committee with the 4 items that they've been tasked with here, they will continue working on these pieces through the summer, and you guys will get regular updates at your strategic planning committee meetings and between meetings if necessary. We've obviously have heard an update from Sandy and Hardy before in the work they've done around educator evaluation, and Sandy and Hardy both sit on the design committee. While the design committee's work will continue through the summer, we are looking at a partnership and are in final contract stages with IU to have them move forward with the teacher evaluation projects that have been identified as priorities for the board beginning in August. So we'll create a seamless transition from the design committee and their thinking into Sandy and Hardy being able to move forward with a 2-year project on providing technical assistance to the field, to the department, but then also doing research and figuring out what's happening with educator evaluation with long-term studies. We actually have Sandy and Hardy here who can share more with you then on what exactly they're doing, but that's how you kind of see the design committee moving into Sandy and Hardy's work.
Yes, David?
I have a question
Sure.
on the legislative process that's going on right now. I just attended a conference committee between the Senate and the House working on teacher evaluation issues. Can you share with us how potential legislation that may be signed by the governor will impact our design committee?
Well, just generally speaking, any law that's enacted from session, we'll have to figure out how to adjust our projects to whatever that ends up looking like. And we still have a week and a half or so to see.
Right.
What I can tell you guys is James Bentley, who's the technical advisor for the board, is having ongoing conversations and working with the board's legislative agenda that you all had to make sure that that continues to move forward. Where it ends up living, it's still hard to tell, but in whatever is enacted, we'll just have to determine how that may or may not affect projects that you guys are currently working on at the strategic planning committee and board levels.
On a personal note, I've talked with 2 of the members of the design committee, and they're really impressed by you and our board staff and feel that the meetings have been rigorous and really beneficial to where we're headed with all of this. So I was really grateful to hear their excitement, and was grateful to hear that through your leadership, the committee's really getting things done. So I appreciate what you've done with
Well,
them.
that's really good to hear. I'll be very candid that in Monday's design committee meeting, they wrestled with some very difficult topics. And for example, one of the topics that they were working with on Monday is what do we see in terms of pros and cons of local decision around educator evaluation versus consistency across districts. And the intention of the conversation was not to determine which is best, local control or consistency across districts, but instead to understand both sides of the argument and where we find continuity between those 2 pieces, local decision and consistency across district. It was a great conversation. I think Sandy and Hardy could probably agree that we all got ourselves worked up at some point because it's meant to be a very tough conversation because we all have different perspectives. And again, kind of giving you an overview of the committee members, we've got folks that work in the field every single day. You've got state level folks that see things a little differently. So it was a good opportunity to learn from each other. And the findings of that work will come before you all in the next strategic planning committee meeting, which I believe is also on May 20th.
Of course.
One more question on inter-rater reliability is a concern of mine, that if you're in Gary, Indiana, or South Bend, Indiana, or Muncie, Indiana, is the evaluation fair in the sense of multiple people doing evaluations through the state? how are we going to ensure that there is some consistent reliability? And is that a topic that this group is looking at?
It came up in a conversation with the design committee, but that's actually one of the things that Sandy and Hardy in their scope of work would be covering. Part of the concern or struggle with inter-rater reliability is that you have to have ongoing training. And you're not just normed once on evaluation tools,
right,
and then all of a sudden you're good to go forever. So ensuring that there's a system at the local level to consistently, I call it norm together as
right,
evaluators from either the district level coming into the school buildings working with the principals, or principals working with each other to make sure that there's consistency across their schools. Sandy and Hardy will be working with LEAs, the local districts, on some of that, but it's primarily making sure that the trainings are the right trainings and that they're not done in isolation. So just having a training at the beginning of the year isn't sufficient, because as the school year goes on, principals have other things that they're concerned about and prioritize. So if we can have a virtual platform, which is something that Sandy and Hardy are also providing, it allows me as an administrator, say during my fall break, to refresh myself on the tool and make sure that if I'm inflating a particular area, that I've got feedback on that and is an area that I can continue to work on as an administrator.
Many school corporations do a really good job, I think, within the corporation with the principals or other evaluators that they have. My concern is statewide, since we're a statewide body. And are you envisioning potentially creating a series of training that everyone would have to go through? And it doesn't have to necessarily be in person. It could be an online module of some kind, but then to offer a person, and I'll use the term loosely, certification or just authorization from us that they've been through some kind of training and they have a keen understanding of what's necessary. Is that where we're headed eventually?
Yes. Yes, and if you'd like, Sandy and Hardy could come up and explain a little bit more and paint a better picture for you, if you would like them to explain that particularly.
Yeah, we absolutely would love to hear from you.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
So I'll just right now focus on the
Just
training.
for the record, could you
Oh,
state
sure.
your name?
I'm Sandy Cole from Indiana University.
And my name is Hardy Murphy, and I'm from Indiana University, but now I'm at IUPUI. I'm the executive director of IUSA.
So I'll focus on the evaluator training since that's the issue that's come up, and feel free, Hardy, to jump in. What we've designed is kind of two key levels, what we're calling level 1 and level 2 evaluator training. Level 1 is an online training system. And if you recall from TNTP, they called it agnostic training or agnostic systems. We're calling it model neutral, so that we can provide at level 1 kind of a general basic overview of components that all evaluators and teachers, because we want teachers to participate in this, should know. So they're based on our INTAS standards for evaluator training. There are 6 standards. There will be a module or a tutorial for each of those standards, and it will take about 3 to 5 hours for an evaluator to complete the online training. At the end of that, they will receive a certification. And as a part of the certification, they have to also complete quizzes that acknowledge that they have reached a minimum standard of understanding. I want to point out that level 1 is simply level 1. It is, if you think about Joyce and Shower's level of understanding, it's really at the awareness part. But these are things that we think everyone should know. Things about feedback, about purpose and intent, about building trust, about gathering evidence and what that means, about how you tie data to professional development, et cetera. Then that certification in our proposal will allow them to go to level 2 training. And level 2 training will be based in our ESCs. We will be responsible for creating the curriculum for the ESCs to use, so it will be a standard curriculum. Hopefully there'll be some flexibility, certainly, but the idea is that everyone receives information and builds skills around some standards. It will be differentiated so that if I feel, as a superintendent, my district has had a lot of training on our rubric, but we're really weak in feedback and giving feedback and holding conferences, then you can do that particular session. Our hope is that at the end of level 2, that we will have evaluators who will complete both level 1, level 2, and get certified in both of those. The real important piece here, I think, and I'll share this with you, and then Hardy, you can give your opinion on this, is somebody has to recognize that certification, or it won't really mean anything. So, you know, at this point, the idea that everyone can create their own evaluator training at the district level is still important because they still have their own unique rubrics and their own unique plans. So we're not saying this takes the place of districts being responsible for some kind of training, but we are saying that we think there's a standard of standards that guide information and knowledge that everyone should have, and that we as a state believe it's important that they have it and are certified in that.
I'd just like to say one thing that Dr. Freitas, you did mention, you talked about state certification. And I think if, in fact, after we finish this process, Ashley, and we have the training in place, to talk about a certification that is backed by the state board or the Department of Education makes it an attractive option for districts. Because there's a difference between having a training that districts have to go to and a training that districts are encouraged to go to that in fact has the backing of the State Board of Education. So the fact that you mentioned that I felt was a very encouraging possibility.
I would really like to explore that through the rulemaking process, and I think it's important. It's so important because teachers' careers are being affected and their pay is being affected, that we have well-trained, documented experiences so that teachers and the community feels really good that there's some kind of a certificate or license that these individuals have completed a process. And so I would look maybe through the rulemaking process to have it mandated, and we can certainly phase it in over time, but without that, I feel that we're not going to have a consistency of quality there. My other question deals with phase 2. Do you see in phase 2 that individuals would have an opportunity to maybe have several case studies, look at teaching vignettes, and have everyone in the group rate it? And then that would maybe answer my question about inter-rater reliability. If we have great discrepancy between several evaluators, we know we need to work on that particular component. But I would hope there would be, in phase 2, level 2, a lot of application where we're viewing teaching. And given the comprehensiveness of this, we could probably even get some teachers to do live teaching and have a discussion and really make it a learning experience for everyone. Do you see that happening?
Yes, and one of the things that we have learned in working with districts across the state over the past, 3 or 4 years now, is that people are suggesting to us that it's important to have teachers trained also. Now, why is that important? That's important because if you are a teacher and you're working with an evaluator, you get a chance to come to a common understanding of what the expectations are, what the criteria for judgment will be, and if in fact you have teachers who are trained over the same kinds of content that the evaluators are trained, then it makes for greater fluency in the supervision and evaluation process. So part of what we will be doing as we develop these modules is we're also going to talk about developing teacher training modules to work through some of their concerns so that they have a greater understanding about what the expectations are, what the judgments, the criteria will be, what their evaluators have been trained upon. And as a result, in the process at the beginning of the year, when they talk about what the expectations are, we're going to have greater understanding there. They're not going to be blind spots.
Can I ask one more question? I don't mean to dominate, but a lot of questions are coming forward. The notion of teacher education institutions, are we planning, Ashley, or maybe this is an IU thing that we can do, but I think we should be working with teacher education, universities, colleges of education in Indiana to talk about the new evaluation system and really push that, not only with educational leadership programs, but teacher education programs so that at the undergraduate level they understand what this whole system is all about. So once they attain a job in the public schools, it's not something new, it's something that they've understood. And to take it a step further, maybe we need to look at student teaching and look at those assessment rubrics and maybe adapt those student teaching assessment rubrics to be aligned with what we're going to do at the public school level.
So I can tell you this, I teach a teacher evaluation course at IUPUI, and I think Sandy has infused this in the course that we teach together down at IU. And one of the things that we do is I ask my students to look at all of the rubrics and to look at commonalities and differences between them. Because I can tell you that when I was a superintendent, one of the things that we saw coming was that it's important for aspiring teachers to understand what the expectations of the system are as far as instructional excellence is concerned. So we ask them to look at the different evaluations so they understand what is expected of them so that there aren't any surprises. As the course continues, I actually ask them to look at what they see as strengths and weaknesses and to develop a class rubric. In this way, they have an opportunity to look at what some of the distinctions are as you go from highly effective to needs to improve and the other dimensions of the rating system. So we think this is a new area that I think everyone understands is very important. And one of the big issues in this is helping teachers to develop greater assessment literacy. As you know, if you look at the present model, when you look at the SLOs, the student learning objectives, everyone has a concern about that. Are they of high quality? Do they meet the rigor of the expectations we want for student learning? So if we can, in fact, help our teachers to develop greater assessment literacy so that they can design and administer assessments that give them a more accurate picture of what student learning is, especially student growth. It helps to inform the instructional process, and it creates a much more powerful teaching and learning experience. Those are the kind of things that we want to head with with our work with the state.
I want to just add one thing about that particular question. KEEP, the Center for Evaluation and Education Policy at IU, is going to issue a brief, I think this fall, that addresses this very issue. And one of the things that they're gathering data on now, and I was interviewed, I know Hardy has been interviewed, is they want to know what higher ed institutions are really doing in order to prepare principals and superintendents for this new era. And so I say that only to kind of give you a heads up to be looking for that brief and for what they say, because I think it's a really important brief.
It's nice everything's coming together, and as these things are published, please share them directly with us so that we're kept up to date. Thank you.
Brad?
Just a couple things. First, I don't think we've had a chance to formally say thank you for jumping into this thing. I know we've talked to you. I know I've personally talked to you offline, but I think it makes a difference. It's not taking anything away from what Ashley's doing, but I know in talking with some of the stakeholders that are meeting with you, your leadership right now, just because of the way you carry yourselves and the bigger vision of what we're trying to do here, it is greatly appreciated. I love what I'm hearing in terms of some of the directed autonomy about having a set of standards, but still leaving room for some autonomy locally. I think it's important. I wanted to just point out to my colleagues here too, we have come before the board here in very short order a CAPE partnership agreement that is critically important that all the board members understand and even for the public to understand, because it is part of, in my mind, part of the concern I've had, and it relates directly to something that Dr. Freitas was just talking about, and that is the DOE for many, many years has allowed institutions to basically use national professional accrediting bodies to review their programs, and if they achieve national recognition of the program, they're essentially given the ability to recommend candidates for license. I've been involved with that for 7 years, and the one concern I've always had is that I understand why our state has gone that direction, and I understand why the state board has blessed that direction. The downside of it is that at a higher ed level, if in fact your entire ability to recommend a candidate for a license is based on getting successful national recognition, national standards sometimes trump state need. So to that point, I'm glad to hear the conversation is happening around how do we infuse this into preparation programs, because my experience in the state has been we do things in the field and higher ed lags behind, and I think if we really want to move forward and move further, it's going to require, if we do in fact create, for example, some kind of certification piece, like you're mentioning. I personally would like to see that, and I think this is, I don't want to put words in David's mouth, but I'd like to see that infused right into the principal leadership programs. But the board needs to be mindful of that as we do these partnership agreements, because if in fact I'm a university, I'm going to say what stick do you have that says I have to do that because I'm worried about the external accrediting body approving my program? So I think the board needs to be, we need to all work together on that to make sure we don't leave any loose ends. And it isn't that we can't have both, but we may need to do some rule promulgation that says we are okay with national program recognition, but your program must also include these state caveats. And if in fact we end up having some kind of principal certification, and even if we create some kind of teacher certification, it'd be nice for them to have it before they even hit the field, and just do it right there at the in-service or pre-service level.
I just want to make a connection from different things that we're working on that actually all come together. And in your next full board meeting on May 7th, Scott Bogan from the department last month floated out the draft benchmarks and standards for teacher preparation programs and just floated it out to you all just kind of as an FYI. And there's a team of people who've been working on making sure that HEA 1388, which is all about teacher prep programs and expectations for prep programs, making sure that there was a diverse group of folks weighing in on what that looks like. In this board meeting on May 7th, Scott's actually coming before you to ask for approval to begin the rulemaking process, in which case you guys know rulemaking takes a while, so we can make sure through that process that these pieces are connecting. Correct. And that they talk to each other really well.
And that's exactly why I brought it up, because I saw it on the agenda. So, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way towards my colleagues on the board. Others on the board may not know to react unless they live in that world every day. And I'm telling you, now's the time. If this is going to be coming, we need to try and combine some of these things, some of these points of intersection. We'll get a better return out of that in terms of what we're trying to do in investing in people.
We can certainly do that. Do you guys have anything else for Sadie and Hardy?
I just wanted to give BJ the opportunity. BJ, do you have any questions? I'll take that as no. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to add one more thing, because I think this is really important to say. We've been fortunate in this process in creating this direction and vision that's aligned with yours to have the collaborative work of Sarah Pease and Ashley, both at the table with them.
I have no question. I'm asking it online. I'm really behind.
Okay.
So I wanted to acknowledge that we're really, really happy that both of them are sitting with us, both of them are supporting the work, both of them are going to be integral parts of this work as we move forward in terms of providing continued guidance to us. So I just wanted to acknowledge both Sarah and Ashley in this process.
Yeah, I'd like to ditto that. I mean, Ashley makes it easy for us, just as you said. And then I want to kind of just put this in the context of one thing that's important. We know that you have a strategic plan. That's what this committee is. We've heard you refer to the dashboard. Part of what we're doing through these different projects that make up the overall project is the intention is to create a data stream that feeds into your dashboard so that you can, in fact, see how you're making progress on some of those indicators. And I think that's an important concept as you move forward talking about this with the full board. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for making that point. I think it's an important point to make that the department and SBOE staff are collaborating on this very important process, and very much appreciate your participation, your input, your leadership. So thank you very much. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Ashley?
Yes, so I actually want to introduce the Standard for Success group that's here. We have Standard for Success here today to share with you the data platform that they've created as we're talking about teacher evaluation or educator evaluation in general. How we use the data is really important. And like you guys, for example, have a balanced scorecard to help keep track of the data at the state level, which is always a challenge. But even as a school administrator, keeping track of observation data, walkthrough data, where are my teachers struggling, how am I supporting my teachers, can all be a challenge. And Todd Whitlock and Tammy Brothers from Standard for Success are here to actually show you what this platform looks like. There are a number of school districts across the state that are using this platform and have been very satisfied with it, and I'll let them share more about that. And then we also have Jenny Fraley from Zionsville Schools. She's a user of this platform, so if you have user-specific questions, Jenny can actually answer those for you. But to see exactly how this works and how we can have user-friendly platforms for determining where my teachers are, or where our teachers are doing really well, where they could use additional support, and how that support can be provided and monitored through this system is really something that we thought was really important to share with you all. One of the goals in your strategic plan is streamlining data systems, which, to the point Hardy just made, is something we're being very mindful and conscious of. And so, because it directly supports Goal 1, we'd really love for them to share with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd, and I believe Tammy is actually going to be doing a live walkthrough with you all. So Todd, I'll just move the mic over for you and Tammy so you can work together. Tammy is doing a live walkthrough, so I'm just going to move the mic over this way.
That's fine.
Well, Ashley, thank you for inviting us to be part of the strategic planning meeting. Just to give you a little feedback or a little background information on Stanford Success. It is an organization that was created by Indiana educators, for Indiana educators, and we've been doing this for over 3 years, helping school systems in the state of Indiana. You have before you a rather large packet that has a number of, a listing of all the school districts that are currently using the platform. We've been lucky enough that we are partnered with the Indiana Association of School Principals and the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents. We're the only platform in Indiana that's partnered with them to provide the resources to the member schools. And they've been very instrumental in the development of the product to meet the needs and actually address a number of the concerns that you brought up previously. So we'll walk you through some of the information there. This product was built for success for the teachers and ultimately for the students, which is one of your goals, I believe. One of your goals is human capital and student success both. I believe is that goal 1 and 2 or 2? And so that falls right in line, because our goal with this was to provide meaningful feedback in a transparent way that allows the teachers to get better through the process rather than being a punitive measure. Unfortunately, when this law came into practice, many of the schools felt it was an attack, especially on the teachers. It was an attack on the teachers, where we wanted to make sure and design a platform to collect data to help teachers improve and help move it from a punitive process to an improvement process. So we'll walk you through some of the things that a number of the districts are doing. Feel free to ask Jenny questions from a building level. They actually have been with us for 3.5 years from when it first started. So they've had great input in the development of the product as well. And we'll turn it over to Tammy to do some of the initial live feed. Then we'll go into the analytics, which I think are going to address a lot of the concerns that you had with integrated reliability and the continuous improvement.
As I go through the main features, please stop us, ask questions. We're very informal, and Jenny can answer a lot of the questions if it's a user question, but we want to show you some of the main things. And then if we're not showing you something, ask us about it. We'll go back through.
Well, you might have heard about us. We're a pretty shy group, so, you know.
Gotcha. Well, up here, this is where we're logged in as a central office administrator, and this is where they do most of their work within this program. They also have their own personal account where they can go and see their observations and how they're being evaluated. But we're going to kind of skip over this top section to let you look at the bottom section. This standards area, we take whatever rubrics that districts have, and you can see here some of them. This is a test site, so we've put on several here on the test site, but we have over 200 rubrics within our system that are different rubrics, but then we also take whatever rubrics that the district uses. They can have multiple rubrics, as many as they'd like to have come on. We're seeing a lot of new rubrics being developed for specialty areas, transportation director, things like that that hadn't been developed before. So they've started with RISE, that was of course the beginning, and then they've adapted and made things their own. So they can have as many rubrics as they'd like to have, and we also have the ability to assign more than one rubric. So if someone is sharing positions like athletic director, assistant principal, they can have 2 rubrics assigned or 3 rubrics based on the percentage of time spent. So that's what is in this area, but the area that they'll work mainly is under the staff area. This, remember, is a test site. That's why you're seeing so much information in here. But what you're seeing here, first of all, a central office person can see everyone in their district. Building level see their own building. And so this is, since it's central office, you could drop down and see all the different schools if you'd like. We do archive information, so they can compare previous year's information to this year's information. So over on this left side, this would be their staff, middle, open observations that are ongoing, and completed observations over here. We have the ability to set up as many observations as are required per person. Sometimes it's different within a district, and we can set those up here. So that's what you're seeing here, short and extended, and it could be multiple numbers. This would be their minimum. So it's a good management tool for an administrator to see, I still need to do an extended or so forth. We are color coding, so anything in green means that teacher's been marked in the upper 2 areas, highly effective and effective. Anything yellow, the lower 2 areas. So at a glance, an administrator can look right here and see where are some trouble areas just to get them started with this. So to do an observation then, we'll just go into, I'm going to use Jenny down here. We'll click on Jenny, and this is pretty much what the teacher is going to see when they log in as well. So things that we can do with the teacher, we can start observations, or here we can view their observations. If I expand these, you're going to see all the observations that have been done, completed this year on Jenny. We number the observations so that you can see from beginning to end of the year how they've progressed in different areas. I'll go ahead and close those. Down below this area, this is the rubric that's assigned to Jenny. And so these little bubbles represent areas that they've been marked this year. So when an evaluator's gone out and has observed, or there are artifacts loaded, they mark them in these areas. And again, they're numbered so they can see at the beginning of the year, maybe they were ineffective. By the end of the year, they've given them PD and so forth, and they've moved up to the effective areas. So that's why we number all of our observations. To do an observation is pretty simple. I'll just show you the basics of it, and then if you have questions, feel free to ask. But this is where the administrator would go, choosing short or extended, and it's just simply a click of a button. If they know a certain area that they're looking for within the rubric, they could go just to that area. So if I know I'm just looking at domain 3, I can go to domain 3 or whatever I'm looking for. This is a timer, this is our scripting box, and the first time that they hit enter, they get a timestamp. It's important for them to have that beginning and ending timestamp. So this would just be where I'm just going to put gibberish in here just so you can see how easy it is to script evidence within this scripting box. We do have an area that they can add attachments if they want to do that, specialty areas for particular notes that perhaps aren't evidence but need to be a part of their observation. They can take notes beneath the individual indicators if they'd like. When it's time for them to map the indicators, it's as simple as looking at the evidence, and I shouldn't say it's simple, but to mark it is simple. Looking at evidence, deciding what indicators go with that evidence, and then click on the indicators. Now, we have put in a new system so that if more than one indicator goes with a piece of evidence, or an indicator goes in several times, you can put them in several times. But then with the hit of the switch here, then we'll mark it the final one time. This is the one that goes into their final areas. So there may be several pieces of evidence that show that they're highly effective, then they only mark it one time for their final. So they would put in as many pieces of evidence as goes with it. And you'll notice that if I mark in the lower areas, it's going to be yellow. So very quickly they can see that. Once they have completed, then there are other things that they can do. They can schedule conferences here, just simply by clicking on it. So in Indiana with your extended, you need to have a conference. They can schedule it right here with the teacher. They can always print PDFs if they need to, add attachments here. This is the scripting by default. Teachers see their scripting, so it's very transparent. Teachers see where they've been marked. So again, that transparency is important. Any notes? This area is for the two-way communication between the teacher or the staff member and the evaluator. So evaluator makes comments that are not evidence, just maybe suggestions for next time, or simply great job, whatever they want to say can be in here, record it, and then the teacher can comment back. And we leave that open for as many days as the district asks us to leave it open. And then when they're finished, they simply make it available to the teacher. We never send any observations via email for privacy issues. The teacher logs in, and when the teacher logs in, they click on it, they click a little box saying that they viewed it, and then they can see all of this as well. So it's really a very transparent, very much a two-way communication tool here. Do you have any questions on the actual observation?
On the practical side, a supervisor would come in with a laptop or an iPad or something like that and go online during the class and complete this during that time.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, we're totally web-based. If we do have some districts that do not have connectivity in the classroom,
Right.
so we also have an app that can be loaded, and they sync before they go into the classroom, do their observation. When they come back to connectivity, it all syncs up online. So everything's 24/7 online. The teacher doesn't see it until it's sent to the teacher. Then they receive an email saying you need to log in and view it. But it's 24/7, so they're always able to see.
Just for clarification, I think this goes with what you're talking about a little bit. Go back in like you were starting one, it's fine. So when we're actually in a live observation, as you just were, if they have a live connection to the internet, they're gonna see all the historical markings. So it's not gonna be in there that you're blind, you don't know what everybody else in the district that has possibly observed that teacher has seen. The dots are live connections showing that historically someone has marked them in this area. If you see areas that have not been marked previously, especially come the end of the year, that teacher should be aware that they have not shown evidence, especially in domain 2, the instruction area, that they ought to be able to provide evidence to you during their teaching that it is going to happen. So there's no surprises at the end of the year. They know where they've been marked. You know what every other administrator has marked out throughout the process. Jenny, do you want to add anything to that?
I love the transparency of it. Our teachers love the transparency of that. I think when you start a system like this, you're always worried about, a couple of things. One is obviously compliance from a legal standpoint, making sure that you have good longitudinal data and protection showing that your protocols were followed with fidelity, and that, that's why we time and date stamp things. That's why we have a dashboard where we can see if somebody's behind on getting to a conference. It's why we can set dates and protocols in there. Our folks have a protocol for, I went in, I saw that classroom, I scripted, and within 2 days I have to have the notes from that out of courtesy in that teacher's hands so he or she can look at it, and then within 5 days I have to have a conference to discuss what we saw together and as we looked at the notes and what happened in the classroom. So that's a piece, and then growth is a piece too. If I'm watching this unfold throughout the year transparently, I can, as a professional, be constantly mid-course correcting on things in areas where I want to grow. I can know what kind of professional development to honor and select. I know what I need to ask colleagues for assistance with, and I can be having an ongoing conversation about my work. And that's respectful practice.
So in domain 2, there's 9 sets of competencies. And does this system require supervisors, principals, to actually make a comment for each one of those 9 competencies under domain 2? Or can it be completed with leaving some blank?
Best assessment practice would involve scripting the class. So collect the evidence first, see what the evidence is showing you. And so what we are looking for is evidence across a domain of a body of work. So do we have to have a comment, or I think what you're looking for is really there a piece of evidence observed of every single item on the rubric and all of the subcategories? We do not. We strive to make sure, if I haven't seen you, for instance, differentiating for instruction, I need to make a point to know, hey, is this person able to do this or not? Because that's an important piece of the work that we're doing with our students. So if I wasn't there on a couple of days where I actually got to directly observe that, then you and I need to have a conversation about that. You need to bring some artifacts. And so we do beginning and middle and end of year conferences, as well as the post-observation conversations. We're on pace right now in our very small district to have had about 1,500 observations and, 15 or 100 or 2,000 conversations about the practice.
So I hear
with
you saying
350 teachers.
Through the scripting process, you do the scripting process first and then align the script to the competencies. However, if there are certain competencies that have been missed in that academic year, for example, you're able to go back and catch that at another observation, is that?
Yeah,
okay.
It's an unfolding body of evidence that you're constantly kind of looking at to see what else you need to be talking about, looking for.
The other question I have is, and I want to be sure I understand this, that the historical data is there in the teacher's file, so as a supervisor, if I'm doing an observation, I would be able to see at that point in time all the observations that have been done for that teacher's career?
Absolutely. You see historically, you see the current year, but you can also go back. So that's very important as you have transition of new administrators coming in. They don't have to search through files to find where their building staff stands, so they are able to see as a whole strengths and weaknesses. We'll show you that in a minute, but also an individual educator as well, where they stand. And that's there. I did want to clarify, you asked if the system allowed you to go ahead and finalize without seeing a competency. Yes, it does, because that would be a local decision. How they score that would fall under local guidelines. The system would not restrict them from giving a finalization score for domain 2.3 or the domain 2 as a whole.
Have you had any issues with bias? If I'm the supervisor and I'm a new administrator and I'm coming in to see a teacher for the first time, and this teacher is maybe a 10, 15-year teacher, and all the other observations are there, wouldn't that bias me as a new administrator coming in, either positive or negative? And has that come up, and how do you address that?
We personally have not had conversations with people having that as a concern, and I think the reason being some of the analytics we'll shows you the inter-array reliability statistics that we're tracking, where we can have those discussions with administrators on their professional development as well to guarantee as best we can, because I don't think you can totally guarantee inter-array reliability, but that you can at least have the data to prove, if you have to go to litigation, that we have a consistency among our evaluators in building and district-wide. And if we don't have consistencies, rather than waiting until the end of the year, we have given them the data that they can address those throughout, so that we don't have the issues at the end of the year.
I think another issue that's important to remember is that the way we're collecting this evidence is I am collecting evidence of a performance. I'm scripting what happened in that classroom. And so it'd be pretty hard for me to fake that script because of a bias that I had developed based upon a review that I had done of 2 years of past work of that teacher. I'm scripting what occurred in front of me. And then if I'm going to tag something to that script, it's going to nest in a script next to, presumably, what some of the evidence that I saw of that, if the rubric is well designed, pretty specific criteria about what good performance looks like.
My question deals with not the same evaluator evaluating individuals over multiple years. My question
I understand.
deals with a new administrator coming in where maybe the previous evaluations were a little skewed or biased for whatever reason. And as long as you feel comfortable and have some diagnostics that can show me that that has not been an issue, I'm fine with that. And you're saying there are some.
I say when it's tied to evidence, there's going to be pretty strong confirmation of what that score means.
Right.
And realize that this is this year's, these marks are from this year. If they're going to see previous, they're going to have to go back and look at those previous years, but what they're seeing right here marked would be this year's markings. The markings don't carry over unless you go back to that previous year.
Final question on this take, as I hate to dominate, but I'm really curious about this. I think it's really important. That question is, once you assemble all of these individuals, do you collect aggregate data to then share with the principal or central office to look at staff across the entire school corporation, and then make a determination on what needs does the school corporation have in particular areas? If we see teachers really need more professional development with cooperative learning or whatever the topic is, does this program provide that aggregate data to help the school district move forward?
We absolutely do, and we'll show you our analytics. I just want to show you one quick thing when you're asking about this area right here, 3.5. If a teacher sees at the end of the year, I haven't been seen here, this is something I need to load an artifact for. This helps that teacher also take some control for their own evaluation. And it's a very simple process. We have up at the top an area where they can just create an artifact. So either the administrator or the teacher can create an artifact. So that helps them to take that control. Let me go ahead and go to the analytics, so that will answer the questions that you were asking about, and I'll let Todd talk to you about these.
So the first one, this was one of the first analytic pieces that we put into this almost 3 years ago, and that was key. Being in a school district in charge of professional development, we wanted to make sure that we knew where we stood up to the minute. And I was at a meeting with one of the first pilot schools, that we're implementing RISE. And a superintendent was presenting, and actually Tammy was at the service center then, and someone asked him, how many observations have your principals done to date? And his answer really kind of got me, because he said, I had a feeling somebody would ask me that, so I called him on the way down here to find out how many observations they had done. And that really took me as an instructional leader, we need to know up to the minute how we stand. So we have built in here, it's called our summary page, that a building principal can see this data for their building. But then also at the district level, you can see it combined or individual buildings or groups, first-year teachers, English teachers. So here we see how many are in progress, how many are in that review mode, waiting for comments, and how many are completed. We know that up to the minute. But then down below, we have the individual rubric broken down. And so I know it's hard to read from where you are, but 2.1 there has how many are currently rated and highly effective. How many are effective? Improvement needed, ineffective. But also up above that it says, 17 staff? 17 staff are marked less than proficient. Without searching all the way through those evaluations, we can click on that, and now Jenny knows what 17 staff members need some additional professional development or discussion throughout the school year. So that helps us direct that professional development at the building level, at the subgroup level, or at the district level. And that's up to the minute data. So that's key to have. Go ahead and click on one of them, the 2.1 or whatever. Because you're aware that the rubric itself has sub-indicators within it as well. So we actually break it down into that area as well. So you see the number of people that are currently rated in each of those areas. And now we could actually click on one of those bubbles, and it's going to pull up and tell us what building they're in and what administrator did the evaluation. So we can even get more data that can help Jenny drive that professional development, maybe the peering or teaming up with teachers that are doing it well with those that may be struggling. So that's one piece of the analytics. Do you have any questions on that? That's just the basic data that we collect and share.
I do on the analytics. What have you seen regarding the distribution over the 4 categories of teaching? At the state level, when we've collected this data for the past 2 years, something like 90% of the teachers in Indiana are highly effective and effective, and that may be true, or it may not be. And so what have you found using these systems? Is that similar to what you're finding, 90% are at those top 2 levels?
And it's funny, we had a discussion with somebody that's been doing this for 3 years, was one of the first schools that had to. And the comment from the superintendent was, when we started this, everybody was scared and we didn't know how to do evaluations correctly. So we probably were inflating our ratings, not intentionally,
sure,
but we were not using it as a method of continuous improvement. So now we're working on building a culture within our school that you may see more yellow dots. You may still end up being an effective teacher, but we're going to work hard with you to identify areas that you need to improve. So I think, Jenny, you probably have seen more yellow dots as you've gone through it.
And given them.
Yeah.
Is the system ever used separately for formative and summative? By that I mean, I think there's some benefit to looking at evaluations from a formative level that I may be a little tougher as a principal if it's formative, because I'm trying to grow all the teachers in that particular school. Whereas with the summative, there's the bias in a positive way to probably rate teachers higher. Have you thought about that? Have you talked about using the system in 2 ways, one formative and then the other summative?
We have talked about that, and in fact, that's probably going to be our next frontier, is to try to work on that as a leadership team. I think it's extremely difficult when there's going to be a summative rating to make anything I do formative when I come into your classroom, because it's going to feel summative, no matter how good a relationship we have, what kind of trust we've built, how much confidence you have as an instructor that you're good, because we're not keeping you if you're not, because students need you to be good at what you're doing. We've talked about having teachers get engaged in that process with one another. That's something we're exploring. We've talked about learning walks, where a group of people are going in and they're using the system to kind of script and kind of work together to mark, and then it's just it doesn't roll up into that summative because they're not the primary evaluator. Our Teachers Association, has some ideas and thoughts on that. Those are certainly things we can do. But as soon as my primary evaluator or somebody whose work is rolling into that summative is in the room doing it, it's summative, even if it's formative along the way. We do look at mode and trend, and I think that makes people feel better about the system. It's not an average of what you got over the course. We're using best assessment practice with them as well.
And you probably know the research that says the person who's doing the summative probably shouldn't do the formative.
Correct.
And I think in Indiana and probably the other 49 states, they've moved in that direction where the same person is doing formative and summative, plus we haven't separated the two. Really, there's two separate purposes. Formative is purely professional development where teachers really share, hopefully, and there's a collaborative effort. Summative is summative, just that we're making a major personnel decision. And so I would turn to Ashley and ask Ashley maybe bring that to the design committee to talk about, should we have two different systems? One for formative, which I think would be a much more honest, open, continuous improvement model, and then a separate summative assessment system.
Brad?
So, I like it. I mean, I can see at the local level, this is a great way to be able to see across your district and see how principals are tracking. At a state level, though, are you also in this system looking at, beside the principal's evaluation, how the overall effectiveness rating is coming out when you add in the other requirements at the state level? Meaning your school letter grade, your whatever you're weighting, your SLOs, does that show up in here at some point? Because one of the things that I've been concerned about when we talk about the last 2 or 3 years of the state totals that come in, because you hear things, is to what extent are principal evaluation ratings of what they're seeing aligning to what data is coming out of the classroom, or what are we getting skewed information at the very end? Are we seeing a true picture overall? And I would think if you had something like this, you could very easily determine whether or not the evaluation, if it's validating what you're seeing in student performance or not, or could potentially have that ability. Make sense?
Yeah, it is. We actually have the finalization worksheet for every staff member that includes their score on their rubric, plus all the value-added data that the district has chosen, whether it be SLOs, growth model, school-wide grade, trend analysis, whatever they happen to be using is in there. And we had a discussion actually with the school district about a month ago that they actually, when I evaluated, went in and looked at their summary score, they had 0 teachers marked in improvement necessary or ineffective. So we had a long discussion in an administrative meeting whether they were all highly effective and effective teachers, or we weren't understanding what we were looking at. So by having the data available to them and comparing it, okay, we're not all A schools and we're not all above 90% passing, so we probably have some things that we need to address, but we're not marking them in the evaluation, so we're not helping our teachers get better. And without having this data at our fingertips, I think we're missing that conversation. And I think schools now that are getting into it more and more are starting to have that conversation and aligning it to their school grade, their standardized assessments, and the other local assessments they're doing to make sure what they're seeing in the classroom is matching what the students are delivering on the assessments. It's key that we're able to track it. So the chart that Tammy has up there right now, and actually this is one of the things that Jenny and then Dr. Best from the Principal Association that we had a lot of discussion on that we make sure we wanted to include. So at the district level, they're able to see the district average, the rating, even though they don't give a score until the end of the year. Every dot is a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4, if they have a four range area. So they're able to see the district average, how everybody is rating, but they're also able to see every evaluator, how they have rated every single evaluation, and also artifacts that they have rated within the system to see if there are those inconsistencies in how someone is rating them. And it's going to show you with green and red underlines whether you're 1 standard deviation above or below the district average. So that chart is there. But we had a discussion, Dr. Best, I think you were involved in that discussion last summer, and Jenny, you were as well, that we needed to take it further. We needed more data than this. So if Tammy actually clicks on the average button there, this is where we started to really have that discussion. We can see now in domain 2, Mr. Buffett there had 248 clicks in domain 2. Of those, it looks like 19%, I can't read it from here, but I think 19% of them were highly effective. And he's an evaluator. So these are the evaluators. So we're seeing how many they're marking in a specific area. Their average may be in line, but we may find that a certain domain 2.1, they are way out of line. So she can even drill down now, go to the standard 2.1 or 2.3. So the average may look like it's in line, but if she would happen to go into one of the others and see, wait a second, 48% of the time you're marking somebody in the bottom 2 categories where everybody else is about 30. Do you have a group of teachers that you may be evaluating that may be struggling, or do you not understand necessarily what we're looking for in engagement or whatever it happens to be? Jenny, you want to comment on this because you had a lot of input, and I don't know if Dr. Best does as well.
Well, I actually also wanted to address a piece of your question, and which is about the idea of comparing what we're seeing on that criterion referenced rubric that may be locally designed and adapted, and we've set the bar high, and so forth. With this criterion reference, presumably everyone could get there. And I think what I hear you saying is, what kind of comparison are you able to do with data extracted from this program or even in reports within this program where you are comparing the criterion reference performance on that rubric to the norm referenced or even criterion referenced data that's coming back in SLOs, IGM, SWL?
I want to make an important clarification because I'm only asking about the capacity of the technology right now, because one of the concerns I have at a philosophical level about the design work of the committee is I'm hoping they're going to get to a point where they're going to engage in a conversation about how to make sure that the evaluation and what's happening with SLO data validate each other at some point, because right now one of the biggest concerns I hear from teachers is that I'm teaching like crazy and I'm highly effective, but if I'm teaching in a particular setting, data could actually drop my evaluation down. And I know that's a design, so I don't want to mix the two things per se. I just want to know if the capacity.
Yes, the answer to your question is yes.
If they can fix that, then can we track it, I guess is where I'm heading.
Yeah, I can pull up a data sheet for my district that'll show every little piece. Here it is right here. This is every teacher in the district, for instance, and every piece of their evaluation, their SLO, their CLO, their TLO, their school-wide learning grade, their IGM if they had it, the rubric score across the various domains, et cetera. I can extract that to a spreadsheet, and then manipulating that spreadsheet, I could say, if I have above this if I have effective or highly effective on the rubric, code it yellow, and if I also had an SLO that was positive, code that yellow, and when they don't match, put a red box over here, and I can do a quick drill down to see right away what's matching, what's not.
That answered it.
Quick question. We've heard through InTAS the level of teacher, or we've seen survey results on the level of teacher confidence in the evaluations that are being performed. Do you have some kind of data or feedback that gives you a sense of how using this model affects teachers' confidence in the system?
I know based on a lot of the feedbacks, we have a ticket system that is rather quick in response, and it's amazing. Most of them are not tickets on the system. They're tickets on the process, or actually, thank you for allowing me to input the data to share with my teacher, or as a teacher, thank you for allowing me to communicate with my principal, because it's hard to sit down and have a meeting when they're in a classroom 80% of the day, and then I'm in the classroom maybe that 20% as well. So we're able to have meaningful feedback and then sit down actually where we have all the data together. And I think that the teachers are finding with the transparency of this system, there's no surprises at the end of the year. Those teachers that are ineffective or in improvement essay are not going to be surprised when they don't get retained or if they're put on a growth plan, because they're going to know throughout the process that they have been marked in that manner. Jenny, do you want to add anything on that?
A tracking tool is only as good as the architecture of the program it's tracking, right? So I think that one of the nice things about what you're considering here with standardization, and it's something that I talked about with Sarah in the audit that I had recently, is that if we do it right, the tool that we're using to track the data should help us shape better architecture of the process and continue to improve the process. And I think that increases people's confidence and trust in the process when the protocols are strong, they're observed with fidelity, and they're similarly carried out across multiple districts where I talk to a friend on Facebook who's teaching someplace else, et cetera. I think that tends to build educator confidence that we know what we're doing and we've got this. We did survey our people at the end of the first year. All 350 folks, I think I had 96% respond to the survey. One of the areas of highest satisfaction right after year one, right out of the gate, which was straight rise, and not during a very happy time for people about that. We had pretty good satisfaction with all aspects of the process, and an extremely high satisfaction rate with the software, because the software allowed them to have that transparent understanding of it as it was unfolding.
I'm impressed by the tool, and I see the tool, and I'm looking for an affirmation or not. The tool is a documentation and communication and organization tool. Mm-hmm. And the real crux of the chairman's question, I think, had to do with the quality of the supervisor. Because isn't that the bottom line? The satisfaction with the experience is going to come back to that supervisor's interaction with that personal teacher. So I don't see it as a system software question. It's really, how do you like that interaction with your supervisor? Was it meaningful? Was it helpful? Did it help you grow?
Right.
And would you agree with that important distinction I just made?
Yeah, we're in a people business. That's what I've given my life career to. So yes, I think human interaction is always the most important part of any growth process.
So any satisfaction survey that we do, it's really not a satisfaction survey of the system. That probably isn't the key thing. It's the satisfaction with that interaction between the supervisor and the teacher.
Right, one of our annual questions for our people is, my supervisor / evaluator cares about my growth as a professional.
Yeah.
Likert scale.
Sorry, I'm out of the mic, but we have a similar question that's on the survey that you all are launching at the end of the week to kind of gauge that across the state too, specific to how they are feeling about the quality and support of their administrator, the person who's directly supervising them, and the supports that they're providing. So is that administrator providing me as a teacher professional development? What does that look like? Just to kind of see that interaction, and if there's a discrepancy there.
If, that's sort of a yes-no question. Hopefully we're going to dig deeper into that.
It's unbundled, so
It is unbundled. We'll have disaggregated.
Yep.
Okay.
And just to reiterate, since you're not on the mic, the survey that's going to start at the end of the week, will launch by the end of the week, will contain a similar question, such that we're able to get that kind of feedback relating to whether the evaluator has, an interest, I guess, or how the teacher feels about their interest in their professional development and growth as a teacher.
And that goes hand in hand with one of the last sections we wanted to show you. The next step that has been missing through this process, which Sandy mentioned a little bit as well, is identifying the areas and then developing the professional development to help the teacher grow and also help the administrator grow. So we have built into the system, it's a professional growth plan model that, as you can see from here, she's just clicked into Jenny. It has identified at the very top of it those areas that are marked less than improvement, or less than proficient, and or less than effective. And now down below, you're able to develop that professional growth plan specifically for that teacher based on the needs that have been identified throughout the process. This could be a mid-year growth plan, or it could be an end-of-the-year formal growth plan, especially for those by code that you're required to put on. But we have built in the last half of your booklet there is a professional development courseware that's not just sit and get videos. It actually can align to the RISE rubric and the other rubrics that the state is using a combination of, that has courseware that now they can enroll in a courseware. Say it's a 10-hour course on student engagement, that throughout the process, that teacher has to go through that. They have to do journaling, they have to do the assessments, and they have to pass it a 70 or 80% proficiency that then would be documented in the professional growth plan and the PGP points that we track for license renewal. Because we have built into the system where the teachers can track their professional growth points for license renewal, and it's easily exportable into the DOE's license renewal system. So now we are providing the documentation that it's actually meaningful professional development provided within the system that allows them to do teacher renewal but targets those areas of need. And that was the feedback that we're getting from the field. You know, we're in over 100 schools in Indiana or school districts, and the feedback is, okay, we're starting to get it now. We've been at this 2 or 3 years. Now we need to take the next step. How are we going to help them grow? We don't want to just have them watch a 30-minute video and then be done with it, or send them to a conference that we don't know if they went to sessions, we don't know who the presenter was, but now we know that you're actually watching something, you're interacting, and we have a certificate then of certification that you've passed at a certain rate. And when we go back in then and see you put that into practice, we should see an improvement in your evaluations. But the next step is also, you can also do the same thing for the administrator. If that analytics that we showed you where they were out of line, they were not rating correctly student engagement, that same coursework that we maybe assign teachers to, we now can assign administrators to, so they understand what student engagement is. Because depending on what subject area that you happen to teach and how long ago it was that you were in the classroom and now you're an administrator evaluating classroom practice, you may need to review some classroom practice. And now we can assign it through the system as well. And that was one of the key components that we're getting feedback from the field, that we need to take it to the next step. We need to build this in so it's integrated and trackable, but then also it's able to upload to the DOE in our license renewal without having to track it in multiple places. It's all in one place, and it's there.
And this is also a perfect platform for the things that Sandy and her group develop, then they could also be integrated here. So this, when you're asking about them taking those courses, it can all be through a system, you know, just the same way that these courses that are already in here are.
Question? I commend you for going with individualized professional development. The days when I taught, where we had the whole school assembly for teachers, whether you needed it or not, you sat through whoever it was. And this notion of individualized professional development is really exciting. My question deals with the resources. And given our society that's technology enhanced, is this part of a national network that you're bringing resources from other avenues nationally and maybe internationally? Yeah, actually the video coursework is actually a partnership we have with Educational Impact. Educational Impact, as actually they're the ones that funded Danielson's original work. Right. There's Marzano, Danielson, a number of experts in there, and actually they have some of the videos from Indiana's Teacher of the Year. Kathy, this went blank. Nemmer. Thank you, Mr. Bass. That is also in their library of professionals, Alan November and a number of others that are in there. And it's all included here for you to see the courseware and the professionals in there. They do that well, so it was important to partner with somebody that does that well rather than try to recreate and go out and curate all that information. They have already done that, and they continue to add more resources. So that was very important to partner with them. It sounds all terrific. My question is, what challenges are there for the system, for teachers, for evaluation? What's you're giving us a very positive and rightly so presentation, but are there challenges, and if so, what are they? I think the biggest challenge from statewide is to have a consistent model to do it, and depending on what the guidelines are. We've been lucky enough that we presented to Ashley and to Sarah and the teacher effectiveness group, and they all see the value.
We're building reports in for Sarah's group for the audits that our clients will automatically be able to populate the data needed for the audits, which is going to ease the work by the department and the work also at the local level. You know, Jenny has gone through that audit. It's very time consuming. And if we can click a button and now they have a populated reports, we made it easier. So we have proposed some solutions that could be implemented statewide. It depends who wants to move on those initiatives, or if that is a decision that someone wants to do. But I think that is the biggest challenge, is coming up with a system that will support the needs of everyone in a customizable way, but also deliver the quality that's expected at the local level.
Well, thank you for your presentation, Todd, Tammy, and Jenny. We really appreciate your being here and sharing this information with us. It's been helpful to hear it firsthand. Appreciate it. Ashley, did you have anything else to add?
I actually have one thing on next steps. I'd be switching gears. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, that's
Okay.
the next agenda item.
Great. So in terms of next steps, I've provided you with the final vision from the design committee. With your permission, the design committee will be finalizing their belief statements and theories of action between now and their next meeting. With your permission, I'd like to hold off on you guys moving those 3 things forward and approving those 3 things to move forward to the board until we have all of them at once so that it can be read together. Is that okay with you guys? We do anticipate that the belief statements and theories of actions will be done by the next strategic planning meeting, in which you guys could move that forward to the board June 3rd if you wanted to, for the June 3rd meeting.
I'm fine, but I have a question.
For me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm totally fine with that. My question had to do with when those recommendations do come. I think there's really 2 things here, and we've had so many conversations, Ashley. I just need you to help me here.
Okay.
I'm anticipating, based on what I heard today, we're going to get recommendations on the tool itself, so potential changes to the RISE tool. I think I heard that right.
Yes.
But should we also anticipate we will get some recommendations on the system, which is a separate issue in my mind, where because I know last month we had AA in here and we talked about trying to mitigating some of the effects and things that we know aren't working well, and maybe recommendations around what do we do about a 1st or 2nd year teacher who's always in needs improvement. Are we going to see some system recommendations as well?
I absolutely expect that. It won't be in this set of recommendations, or it won't be included with the 3 things that come before you for the May 20th strategic planning meeting. Those 3 things for May 20th will be the vision, belief statements, and theories of action. The system recommendations, Brad, and like the rubric streamlining recommendations, those are bigger things for them to tinker with, to be honest. And so I expect those recommendations to come by the end of summertime. So before they start the school year, we should be ready to move all of that forward. And I think, too, it gives us an opportunity to see what comes out of the legislature, recognize if we have any design things that come out of that or system pieces that we can rectify that with the design committee during their meeting times, both virtually and their in-person meetings that they have.
I think that's fine with me.
And they also, I'm sorry, can I follow up on
Yeah.
one thing? Brad, you also mentioned the SLO piece. That surfaced in the conversation between local decision and consistency across districts, and it was put on the parking lot for discussion for this next meeting as well. So that is something that they're wrestling with, particularly around SLOs. So we expect that to be a follow-up conversation and to hopefully have some recommendations come out based on what we've heard.
So you talked very briefly earlier in the meeting about the legislative process, and the sausage making is still ongoing for the next few days. And so I don't necessarily need to see inside that, but can you give us your understanding? I know there's meetings happening right now, but could you give us an update as to the legislative agenda that was adopted by this committee and adopted by the full board, if you know of kind of the status, direction?
So I had to ask our technical advisor, James Bentley. He leads that. And he said it's continuing to move along. Where it all lands, that's still the big old question that we have hanging out there. So we'll see where exactly all the pieces live. But he says things are continuing to move along. And that obviously we should know more in the coming days of exactly what that looks like. But I believe you're asking about the SBOE Ledge Bill 1486. So, still to be
What's
determined.
the degree of confidence, or do you have a degree of confidence that
I
the
personally,
legislative agenda will make it into a bill?
I personally don't, because I don't work with it directly. James does. I certainly could ask him. I know obviously there are things that we've seen be very public and up for discussion through the course of session so far. An example of that would be significantly inform. That is not moving forward, I can tell you that confidently. But then there are other pieces that were in that bill. So data sharing, for example, was one of the components in the bill of basically the board's need to have clear expectations for data sharing. So my gut check at the moment would be some things will probably live and some things probably will not. I still think myself it's too early to determine what exactly will live and what exactly will not.
And just for the record, we did not ask the legislature to define significantly inform. We asked the legislature for the authority for the state board to start a process to define what that all meant.
The range
The
and
range,
guardrails,
the
correct.
criteria,
Which was
et
authority
cetera.
that the board had before, and the rulemaking process expired. So it was basically a permission for renewal.
Right.
So you're correct, and that wasn't a specific percentage ask. It was saying, can we just have permission again to be able to create the rulemaking process or start the rulemaking process around defining a range of what significantly
And
informed means.
based on what I'm hearing from you and from what I've seen so far is that the legislature is not interested in granting the State Board of Education that renewed authority to do that.
That I would feel confident in saying that.
If that's the case, we control our own rulemaking. So if they're
Yes.
silent through law, it's my understanding that we would have the authority to go back to that and define that term.
That would certainly, I am not a lawyer, but that is certainly something that our general counsel has worked on and has tinkered with. So I think that's a direct question you probably should ask John Sneathen.
Okay.
Brad, did you have anything?
I'm going to hold. I do want to make some closing comments,
Sure.
but I'm going to hold. I was going to bite on the conversation about significantly informed, but I'm going to hold tight.
I don't think we have anything else on our agenda. BJ, do you have any comments or questions that you'd like to ask before the end of the meeting?
Just if I could piggyback on what Ashley said to introduce the second speaker, I think it's very, very important that when we roll this out, after hearing that presentation today, which I really enjoyed, I think when teachers understand that this is not a gotcha tool, this is something we want you to use to understand areas that you need help. And we're going to get you individualized special development in that area. And I think that also contributes to, there's lots of questions about 90% of the teachers are highly effective or effective. I think if we look at those numbers at the beginning of the year, that number wouldn't be 90%. But with that first evaluation, when we point out the areas where there are help that's needed, and we get you help in those areas, it appears to me that what we're doing is working. Because the areas where teachers need help, we're getting them that help, which is in turn improving instruction in the classroom. And I want to make sure that teachers understand that that is our goal here. We're not trying to find areas where you have deficiencies to harm you, it is to help you. I don't think we've done a good enough job getting that message out. And I think that when that message is presented, that there will be true buy-in from educators.
Good point. I mean, I think, you know, the teachers can find out early on, and the administrators can find out early on where there are areas that need focus, and it can be a positive process throughout the school year.
And I think also that we need to understand that just because you're effective, that doesn't mean, I think we saw there still may be lots of areas listed where you need improvement and areas that we're going to address, but nonetheless, you're still rock solid. And I think as long as we maintain addressing those areas where they need help and teachers don't feel threatened, this is something very valuable.
Well, thanks for that point, BJ. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
David, do you have anything else?
Just a couple
Brad?
closing thoughts. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for your time, for your presentation. Very informative, very helpful, and including thinking about, it's it's got me thinking about next steps, but at a state level, and I saw a lot of things. So I also want to say, and I can't see Dr. Cole and Dr. Murphy back there, but I know they're back there somewhere. Yep, still there. Appreciate your leadership as well. You already answered a little bit of my concern about really the recommendation becoming forward, but as we started thinking about this technology, this has stuck with me since we came back from NASB about really taking advantage of data and maximizing the use on that. And we saw a great presentation today. I would just say to you, Ashley, a couple of things that I would love for that conversation with that team to still think about, because at some point, I suspect if we stay on this route, we're going to be talking about some kind of procurement of a tool at a state level. And I would hope that if we do that, how do we track, just as you can track teachers within a district, I'm concerned about the mobility. I'm concerned right now because of the way teacher compensation is tied to evaluation and for other reasons on teachers' earning potential. They're jumping all over the place. And the ability to see what's happening with that same teacher as they move from District A to District B to District C. First of all, I hope we fix the system and we stop that. That would make me really happy if we could settle that down, and I know that requires some legislative help. But if we had a system and we had some data, we could better tell that story to our lawmakers to help them understand what's happening. Because it's really hard to change the culture of a school when you're turning over your teachers every year. I can tell you, I've been there, done that, and I know Dr. Best has seen that as well. HB 1388, that came up today, and I'm glad it did, but I think this is another place where the tool could help, because I would love to see that tool, if we're going to go through some kind of a procurement for a tool, be made available to higher ed, so that when we're training beginning teachers, why not use that as part of their collection and their student teaching, and then we have a baseline before they even go into their first year. Not so much for accountability, but in as much as we already know where they're at, and we can see it, particularly since 1388 is about going back to the people who trained them, to give them some real meaningful data about, can they do what you said they could do when you graduated them? So I think there's a 1388 tie there and a tool like that. The other two, the last one you mentioned briefly was the whole PGP concept, and I love that. To take that to a state level, and we've talked before about potential clearinghouses for professional development. It seems crazy that we've got 374 districts all trying to find professional development materials to meet things that are aligned to these rubrics. So the word standardization came up today. I hope we keep that at the forefront. There are ways to do standardization without digging into people's autonomy locally. And I appreciate that conversation is going on. I know it's got to be a difficult conversation for you all to lead, but it's a critical conversation. There's got to be some way where we don't deny ourselves economies of scale because we're so worried about somehow we're trampling on somebody's local rights, and I think that can be balanced. And then the last thing, and this really is not met in any, I know this, I run the risk of this being misunderstood, but I would really like to see that Superintendent Ritz is on board with this at level. This is going to require leadership more than just the board. It's going to require the state superintendent of public instruction. I'm not saying she's not behind it, but I really want to see that, because if this thing goes, and it really needs to go, and there's a procurement process involved, DOE is probably going to be at that point. I mean, I know we have some resources. I don't know where it's going to land, but I would really like to see that, and I know DOE has representation, but when this thing comes to the board, I would really like to see our chief state school officer say, this could do more to advance the cause of quality teaching and learning in a state, and really get behind it. And so I'll leave that at that. But those were some of my thoughts that came out today, and really did appreciate all the presentations.
I would just say, I would look to the State Board of Education staff to follow up that point, Brad, with DOE staff who was here today, and give us some feedback as a committee. And certainly would be, as this process moves forward, look forward to hearing from the Department of Education as well, perhaps at the next board meeting on their thoughts. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else on our agenda this afternoon. I would entertain a motion to adjourn the committee meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The meeting is adjourned.